Welcome everyone to the Go Within podcast. My name is Yasmin. I'm the founder of Sanya, and this is going to be the second podcast of 2023 with my beautiful friend Alex, who I've invited here to just have an informal conversation. One of my intentions behind the podcast is to check in with you all, the Go Within podcast audience, because it's been quite a while since I've podcasted, and I just wanted to give a little bit of an update of what's been going on at Sanya. Some of you listeners are even not even living in Malta, so maybe you're a bit disconnected from Sanya. So I wanted to share with you some of the things that I've been up to and how that's going to feed into this podcast and how it's going to feed into the vision of 2023. This was actually supposed to be the first podcast of the year, but I ended up sneaking in another one yesterday. So there were, a little bit of a few drops of what I've been up to over the last few months. But this is going to be a bit of a deeper dive into the state of Sanya and my own personal journey. So thanks, Al, for being here and coming to explore with me.
Yes, thank you for always inviting me. And I'm excited also even to hear from my side what's been going on and a lot of your journey over the past year, because I know it's been a powerful one, and I'm sure that your listeners will benefit a lot from hearing the growth and the change and what's been happening. So always a pleasure.
Beautiful.
Hi everyone.
So where to start? I don't know. I mean, you kind of, teased in a little bit there that 2022 was a really big year for me on my own personal journey. I think it's going to be one of those years that I look back at and think, wow, that was a really significant change within myself.
Like mostly on the personal side, you mean?
Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Like my own inner work really ramped up that year. And it was
automatically that kind of reflects in your business, right? In Sanya and
yes and no, because I was so kind of overwhelmed by my own processes, and I was doing so much of my focus went onto my own healing that I do feel like it kind of maybe took away a little bit from my creativity outward. But it was also necessary, and that's going to kind of fuel into the longer term vision, right? Sometimes you need to just kind of stop putting things out into the world and just take that moment to go within and realign yourself and recharge yourself. And a lot of the things that I've been teaching here at Sanya over the past few years were the product of work that I did, in the beginning of my journey and obviously ongoing, but I feel like the work that I did this year is going to feed into the next, few years of Sanya, because obviously there are lots of things that others will relate to.
And I think it's really powerful because often, sometimes we think, okay, I did my work and then that's it, I'm good now, I don't need to keep working on myself. And this is a real testimony to the fact that it's a lifelong journey, going within and working on yourself. And just when you have resolved certain things within, then, deeper layers arise. And I'm sure this is what is going to be what you're sharing about, because obviously I have a bit of insight because I hear. So I don't know, how would you like to start about maybe the practices that have supported you through your journey?
Yeah, so I think obviously CI has been a huge part of the year, so maybe I can give a little bit of an explanation about what CI is. So for those of you that don't know, CI is compassionate inquiry. It's a method of therapy that was created by Dr. Gabor Mate, who is one of the world-renowned experts on trauma, childhood healing, and addiction. And I have been very attracted to his work in general because it's, very much linked to a lot of the things that I've experienced in my previous, in all the previous work that I've done on myself. And thanks to inspiration from a friend of mine who was also doing the course and really speaking very highly about the work, and also witnessing, her own journey of transformation through it, my curiosity really got piqued. So I decided to undertake this 1-year professional training. And exactly as I started the course, a lot of things happened in my personal life that were super painful. So it was, a glorious coincidence. Glorious. I didn't feel glorious at the time, but
not fun, but powerful.
Yeah. So it was super challenging because the method itself basically is a form of talk therapy where the therapists who are trained in compassionate inquiry they lead you through an inquiry into a trigger that's coming up. So usually when you start a session, you'd have an intention of what you want to work with that day. So for example, you could have overreacted with a friend, and you come into the therapy and you say, I want to explore why I overreacted, or why I'm feeling guilty because I overreacted, or whatever that.
What's deeper behind that?
Exactly. So yeah, you go into this therapy with this intention, and then the therapist will ask these questions that Gabor has, formulated as a methodology. But it's also very somatic, so they take you a lot into the body, into feeling the body. So, if you say, okay, I got triggered, they take you to the trigger and say, okay, let's take a few breaths into the body and see what's the sensation, and then what's the feeling, and you start exploring in a very soft and gentle way. So in this course, I've been learning how to use this methodology, but also it involves a lot of work on yourself, because you need to have this method done onto you at least once a week, if not more. So that's already, you're doing a lot of therapy. We've been joking in our course this week, like we're all therapied out. I've done so much therapy in the last 6 to 8 months. But the method itself has been hugely supportive for me at that time when a lot of other pain was coming up. So it's like I didn't have to dig too deep. The pain was already like every time, I had this intention, because I was, it was really sort of disturbing my life, Mm-hmm. So I needed that support to process it and find the root of it so that I could manage it.
Yes, and I think what's maybe a bit different to the regular talk therapies, it's a lot about the body, right? Like what you said, somatics. So maybe you can elaborate on that, because for some people, maybe it's a new experience to sort of like get, let's say, the insight from the physical feelings in the body. And also, the fact that this is often trauma that comes from childhood, and you somehow find yourself back in that age, right? In a very surreal way. But until you experience it, it's almost hard to even believe that suddenly you find yourself almost like back into a pain that you had when you were 7, and it's so present suddenly from being, 30s, 40s, it's still there. That when I had experienced CI, it was like really surprising for me, and it's a bit surreal. Maybe you can elaborate a bit on that.
Yeah,
because,
definitely. The somatic approach, which basically just means a body-based approach to therapy, for me, it wasn't something that came naturally. I'm a very analytical person. I'm very reflective. I use my mind a lot to make sense of the world. So when I started, really going into the body, it brought up a lot. And as I said, I was going through things that were painful already, which pain is a very, physical experience. And what I realized through the therapy was that by going into the body, I was tapping into emotions that were very overwhelming to me. And they're overwhelming because when we're a child, we don't know how to process. So we have to kind of numb and tamper down, these emotions, because especially if we don't have an adult who can really feel and attune and give us that support, which many adults, not sort of as a bad intention or as a lack of love, but they don't necessarily always know what the child needs. And sometimes we parent from a place of, oh, I didn't get this in my childhood, so I'm going to give this to my kids, as opposed to, okay, what do children need to develop? Mm-hmm. And one of the things that children need the most, which sadly a lot of us don't get to the extent that maybe would be ideal, is this safe, attuned presence from our caregivers who can help us learn to hold the emotion.
And also accept it fully. Yeah. Rather than like not wanting our child to be sad or upset or screaming.
Exactly. You can't hold space for an emotion if you're not accepting it, right? Mm-hmm. So, this is why it's very important for adults and especially parents to do the work on themselves, because they can only hold space for their kids' emotions to the extent that they can hold space for their own. It's the same with a therapist. A therapist can only hold space for your emotion to the extent that they've held space for your own. If you have grief come up in a therapy session and the therapist is a bit uncomfortable with her own grief or his grief, then he's going to resist it and he's going to try and give you a solution, and he's going to subtly and subconsciously give you a message that it's not okay to feel that way. So, yeah, the somatic approach of the body and learning how to feel safe, to feel our own emotions is critical for healing. And for me personally, it really opened up a whole new level of connection with myself and connection with my feelings, because I slowly managed to expand my capacity to feel things that as a child I didn't know how to feel.
Yes, and that's a survival mechanism, right? Like as a child, when we go through something, let's say, that's very difficult and hard for us to process, then it also makes sense that we can't process it because we don't know how, we're not mature enough yet. And we create this mechanism, right, that we go protect ourselves so we don't feel it. The issue is then when that plays out till we're an adult without us doing any work on it. So that's why I think it's so powerful, because it's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, there's a limit to how much our parents can support us growing up, but if we literally can't process that pain because we're too young, it's like something we all need to experience in a way, this healing of that childhood trauma, because no matter how great our parents are, it's still gonna happen at some point.
Exactly. And the world is a harsh place, so even if pain doesn't come from anything wrong with the family situation, sometimes relatives or friends die, or accidents happen, or some kids end up getting a health condition and having to be separated from their mother. Or there are so many things about life which are hard. And yes, you're totally right that thank God we have this mechanism to numb our emotions, because sometimes we need it to survive. But what really helps us to survive actually really blocks us in our adulthood, because an adult's brain is different, right? Like an adult has the capacity, or at least the potential capacity, to be able to hold their own emotion and to regulate their own nervous system with support and with skills and so on, whereas a child doesn't. And it's not even just about not being able to hold the emotion. It's also, we all start at a developmental level, sort of totally narcissistic as a baby, right? And then as we slowly age, we go into different developmental stages. But kids, especially, below the age of 10, are inherently narcissistic, right? Like it's all about them. So, which is a natural thing. But that unfortunately leads to the creation of many beliefs, because then when things go wrong, kids automatically blame themselves. A kid doesn't have the capacity to say, okay, well, this person snapped at me, maybe they're having a bad day. A kid will say, they don't love me, because it's all about them.
Yes.
Right? And that's how we are when we're in our ego. Even as adults, we make it all about us.
Yes, and I don't know how many people I've spoken to who had parents who split up, and the child really easily feels like it's their fault, even if it completely isn't.
That's a total classic. I mean, separations happen, people, lose compatibility, maybe they don't make each other happy anymore, and it is a natural part of life that some relationships don't last, the distance. But obviously when there are kids involved, that has an impact on the children. And it's not about, saying you have to stay together, not to damage the kids, but it's about, okay, how can we support the kids to actually process, and are they in the age where they can be given the tools? Because that's not even always possible, right? Like sometimes kids are just too young to be able to make sense of this. But even if it happens when they're younger, at least when they're older, me and Simon were talking yesterday about sorting out your emotional inheritance, right? Like it's okay for kids to get hurt, but it's about how do we support them to make sense of that pain so that they don't create beliefs about themselves that they're not going to sabotage them for the rest of their life, and especially in their own relationships. It's a very, delicate subject, because it's not about blaming anyone for doing anything wrong, but it's about how can we bring more supportive mechanisms to parents as well, because, it's hard to be a parent nowadays. And especially for many women, they're balancing being a mother with running their own business or having a career, very often looking after their own parents or their in-laws. There's so much pressure, and it's not always easy to find the time to self-regulate yourself and to do the things that are actually going to help you cope with your own stresses, let alone then also have the responsibility of holding space for kids.
Yes, I can really feel that. I get this feedback from a lot of people I know, and there's some sadness to it as well, because it's, generally parents, you feel that they just want so much care for their child, but they're balancing so many things at the same time. And I guess my question is because I know that if we do take time for self-regulation, actually, even though we have so many more other responsibilities, it can actually support so much more that whole other process. Because often I feel like, even to myself, I'm like, oh, I don't have time to meditate. And there's this saying, that the more you meditate, the more time you get, which, the mind doesn't really work that out. But I think it's the same with regulating your nervous system and, dealing with these sort of trapped traumas from childhood.
I think we have a lot of guilt and other emotions that sabotage us from looking after ourselves. So, I have many clients, who are mothers who find it difficult to prioritize their own well-being, which is totally understandable because a mother is programmed that if she has to choose between her child's well-being or her own, she's going to choose the child. Like, it's just biological instinct, to protect the child. And actually, I think we sort of need, as a society, to really see how can we help mothers as well. So that, Gabor always tells this story, which really touched me, about a mother bear and how a mother bear doesn't need to choose between looking after her and her cubs because nature has provided for her. She has food at hand. She has community. There's never any time where she has to choose. Whereas us in our modern life, we constantly have to choose. Like, am I going to drive my kid to her ballet lesson or am I going to take an hour to go to my own yoga class, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a choice that we've created as a society by the way that we have structured and the responsibilities and the pressure and the choices that we've made. And I think we do need to kind of take a step back and saying, like, are we doing enough to help, especially mothers? Because realistically, the burden does fall more on the mothers than the fathers. And, again, like, also, how can we support fathers, right? Because they play a huge role in parenting and in supporting the mothers too.
Yes, totally.
So I think, our modern lives are so driven by, material success and, the idea of being a financial provider and getting financial success, that we somehow need to, like, rebalance the table so that actually the work that we do to emotionally provide and to emotionally nurture has more importance. And if you look at ancient tribes, they had this. Like, they really put a lot of importance into the emotional nurturing.
Yes, and also, like, a deep trust that if we do focus on these sort of things that regulate us and support us, then everything else will also be supported, directly.
Yeah. Another thing that I really learned is that one of the reasons why we don't care for ourselves, at least I can say from personal experience, but I think it's maybe something that others will resonate with too. Because I had this coping mechanism of being a child, of numbing my emotions, in adulthood, it was very easy to numb the emotions that say, take care of yourself, or maybe you should say no to this, because you're already used to numbing your feelings and putting them aside. So what I realized was when I went back to that inner child and said, okay, hold on, like, really, you shouldn't have, but sort of, there is another way other than numbing your emotions, right? There is an actual listening to them and holding them, and even when they're uncomfortable, being able to communicate with them. And when I did that and I came closer to letting my inner child voice her needs, it transformed into a more natural desire to look after myself. Because suddenly, if someone says, oh, I want to have a session at 8 p.m., suddenly I'm more in tune with that part of me that's like, I'm going to be really tired if I do that. Whereas before I could have numbed that and just said, yes, okay, because I'm seeing it from a mental point of view. I'm like, that person needs help, so yes, I'll help them. Without being very present with, okay, hold on, but how's that going to make me feel?
Mm-hmm.
And then tomorrow, how am I going to show up with my clients or at work? So it was a really huge realization for me to realize the connection between how easy or hard it is to look after ourselves and how connected we are with our inner child, how much we've let those needs of the inner child be voiced. So in my case, it's really shifted me in a very deep way.
Yes, it's funny because I had the same situation yesterday. I wanted actually to come here and film something, and I was like, it was 8 o'clock after the yoga class, and I'm like, oh, I feel so late, and I was going to come, and then at some point I'm so tired, and like, I need to take care of myself, and I'm really happy I did that, but it's taken me years to get to this point, whereas a year ago I probably wouldn't have done that. I would have just not listened, and it's exactly what you're saying, and it's a learning curve. And it's like this program, right? Like we've had this program from a young age to constantly react in that certain way. Then it's like something that keeps running itself until we take active choices to notice the program and then stray away from that program that keeps replaying over and over again. And it's when I experienced a compassionate inquiry, for me, it was a very surreal experience because I felt like I had this voice inside of me that when I was really feeling into what was going on, almost like a voice talking to me and protecting me and being like, no, this pain is too much. You know, like I'm like, why am I not wanting to feel it? And I could feel like almost a being inside of me that was like, no, it's too much for you to feel. And the therapist was guiding me to actually talk to this voice and be like, listen, you've helped me with this when I was a child, and like, thank you, but now I can handle it. I can handle this pain. And I literally had this conversation with this voice in my head saying, thank you. This served me when I was younger, but now I can handle this pain. And it was so profound for me. It changed a lot. And
yeah, I think one of the great services that Dr. Gabor Mate has given the world is just this, and not just him, because there are many other people, like him, professionals working in this field, but they've really given a more mainstream understanding of just how important our childhoods are. Because a lot of us have this resistance, we love our parents, so there's a part that doesn't want to say, oh, they did this wrong, or they made this mistake. We almost feel like to acknowledge an experience is to blame, which they're not. They're two different things, but there is a sense of guilt and a sense of sort of respect that sometimes gets in the way of just, being able to honor the truth of our experience. And also, many people just say, oh, it's in the past now. Why do I need to go back there? Or there's so many reasons, right, that we give ourselves not to open that can of worms again. And it's exactly as you say, it's partly because it's so overwhelming and it brings up a lot of complex emotions that need guidance and need support to be sorted through.
yes,
Even something that you shared, like about your protector, and talking to that protector and understanding it and giving compassion to it, and learning these mechanisms, It's not always easy to get to that stage where we're compassionate. A lot of people feel very frustrated that they can't feel their pain, or very sort of self-judgmental that, I should be able to feel it, or I should, we do a lot of this stuff. So
I did that as well.
So yeah, the word compassion in compassionate inquiry, I think, is very significant and very beautiful.
Yes.
That we have to learn how to be very compassionate with ourselves and the reasons why we feel the way we do today and the reasons why we take certain choices.
Yes, I'll just share like my short experience on this because it's exactly what you were saying. I was doing a process where I was connecting to some childhood pain that I had, where my dad wouldn't always make it to my plays or my sports days or my parent-teacher things, or he'd come late, and I was connecting to that pain of like him arriving late or not showing up, and like almost going back to those sports days, looking out for him, and then when I was acknowledging it, I'm like, wait, but my dad, he was working, he was trying to take care of me, he was just doing his own thing to like take care of me, and it's maybe not what I wanted as a child, but he was still giving me love in his own way. But I was disregarding that pain that I had as a child because it was uncomfortable coming back up. I'm like, man, I'm like almost 35 now, like I'm still gonna mourn that my dad didn't come to my sports day, And then I was disregarding that I should feel that pain because no, my dad was loving me and he did his best, and I don't even deserve to allow myself to feel that pain. And then the therapist supported me to allow that to surface and realize that it's not about him or what he did, but it's about that pain that wasn't allowed to be felt, and I'm feeling it now, and that's how I can move through it. It was super powerful for me, and I could see how I was catching myself. No, I don't deserve to feel this pain because he was doing his best, though. It's not relevant. It's not even relevant. My mind was trying to again make an escape mechanism to get out of feeling it because it's like, no, I don't deserve to feel this pain because he was doing his best. It's amazing.
That's what we do, right? Like we rationalize and create stories and beliefs around every emotion that's hard to feel.
And it's subtle because that's the mechanism. That's the no, I don't feel that pain. It's past. It's in the past now. Incredible.
Yeah, I mean, it's super vulnerable to feel those kind of pains, right? Because we do judge ourselves and say like, oh my God, I'm 35. Do I really need to cry for this 7-year-old experience? But the thing is that experience is showing up today, right? And that's where we have to be a bit honest and say, yeah, this is why I like that we start with today's triggers, right? Because let's say your boyfriend was late to meet you, right? And instead of just being totally relaxed and saying, okay, whatever XYZ happened, you would feel that pain.
That's what happens to me. It's true.
No, it happens to all of us.
Because it triggers that old feeling of like not being maybe prioritized in the eyes of a child.
Exactly.
You know?
And the beauty about compassionate inquiry is that you go back to that child and understand the beliefs that they created.
Yes.
So, for example, I'm not putting words in your mouth here, but just as an example, which might be correct or not, that child believed, oh, I have to justify, his action by his work, for example, right? And then that same belief that child will be created comes into your adulthood. So now we're justifying, not listening to pain by overworking ourselves.
Yes.
Right? And we're putting away our own emotions for a rational reason, which, again, like it helped us and it was great that we had it. But now do we want to relate to our pain in that way? Or do we just want to give it voice? Because as soon as you let yourself grieve for that 7, 10, whatever, who didn't have her dad at sports day, it totally dissolves. The pain of it dissolves.
Yes, exactly.
So we're either going to keep carrying it and pretending that we don't have it and just saying, oh no, it's in the past. Oh no, I can totally understand why my dad did that or blah, blah, blah. But the reality is it's still showing up and controlling our lives. Whereas if we just stop and hold it, yes, it's vulnerable. Yes, it's, sometimes even embarrassing, to have to bring up issues that as an adult can feel so petty. They weren't petty as a child and we're still carrying them in our nervous system. So I can say like it's super brave to do this work because honestly, I have a lot of support mechanism and a lot of experience and I still struggled. And it really, gave me this just respect, for all the people willing to do this work because it is vulnerable and there are going to be times where you're like, what the hell? Like, maybe it was just easier to stay suppressed and stay, no, it's true.
Yes,
because
in the short term, in a way.
In the short term, it's easier. It's more stable. Like, I really struggled some days at work because I couldn't focus and pain was coming up. And I really judged myself because I was like, I have responsibilities. People need me. I can't, just be a wreck for month after month. And as the months went by of me struggling, I got harder on myself because it's been 6 months now. I should have it figured out. It's been 7 months now. I should have it figured out. And I was laughing because Elle, witnessed a lot of my moments where I just was really overcome with grief. And every time, like, I was giving her all of these reasons why I shouldn't be feeling it. And she would just look at me and laugh and just be like, and I could witness myself resisting it. And I was laughing at myself, but at the same time, I had to really own the fact that I was putting all this pressure on myself to be any different to how I was, and the vulnerability that comes with, okay, now I have this identity, I'm the CEO of a major company and I'm here and I'm feeling, really grief stricken and I don't want to go to work, and obviously the judgments and the pressures that you put on yourself, they also have their own roots.
Yes.
And I think if you can when I actually just stopped and said like, you know what, like out of the however many decades I'm going to live, like just taking 1 year, even if it took me 1 year, like, is that okay? And I just imagine myself speaking to a client who came to me and was going through a bit of I call it a midlife crisis because that's how it felt. Like, would I tell them, like, it's totally okay to just take a few months and not be at your best and do your best, but you're not at your best and that's okay. And just honor the healing process. And it took me many months of resistance to get to that point of grace. So I can't say I just, gracefully surrendered into it. My ego fought and my pain body or whatever it was really fought against it.
But in a way, this resistance, this pain body, again, it's this mechanism that was built specifically to protect you that's just kind of still lingering, so.
Yes, but also I think sometimes we have to experience deep pain to change. Like realistically, if it hadn't been as painful as it was, I think there are many coping mechanisms which I would have just carried on with because they were working.
Yes.
Like people often tell me like, wow, you have such capacity, you're running Shire, you're running Sanya, like you do so much, like how do you do it? And I got to the point within the CI where I kind of saw that even though I can, do I want to? Do I want to keep on like loading this capacity on myself? Or do I want to design my life in a way that I can do it all without putting my own needs aside? Which, of course, I can, right? It's just about giving that need space. And once you have that need, you will figure out, the logistics of how to make that work. So again, if I hadn't gotten to the point where it was hard to go to work, I'd have just carried on. But because it was hard, then I had to really question, okay, why am I doing the things that I'm doing? Why am I making the choices? Why have I been, putting certain needs aside? And there is, it's a cliche that sometimes pain is the only way that we really learn. But I have to say, looking back now, feeling a lot more emotionally stable, I wouldn't change it, because I think I needed to suffer that much to be able to unfold a new way of being. So yes, the pain is there because of our ego and our pain and our trauma, but at the same time, it's also there as a teacher.
No, what I meant was the resistance to the pain, because that's something that we created to protect ourselves. We don't need that anymore.
Yeah. It's hard to let it go.
I started practicing this thing of like trying to empathize with the judger, with the person who's judging, because it's like, oh, why am I, judging myself? Empathizing with the fact that I'm judging. Oh, I'm judging because, actually, I just need some empathy to the fact that it's not going the way I wish. Yes, so powerful.
Yeah, it's there's a lot to be said for just, again, cliche, but surrendering to how we feel. And it's ironic that we have to learn it, right? But we do. And I was saying this in the podcast yesterday that, it's like no matter how perfect our lives were, if we had no trauma at all, if we had the perfect upbringing, if we weren't hurt in any single way, it's kind of like the story of Siddhartha. I don't know if you've read that book.
I think you might have shared it with me.
It's a really, really beautiful book, and it's the story of a prince who later became the Buddha. So he started as Siddhartha. And he was born into a royal family, and his father, the king, wanted to completely protect him so that he would never see anyone old, anyone sick, or anyone poor. So he wanted to keep his heart intact so he'd never see any suffering. So he lived in this walled palace of the kingdom in this just totally protected environment. And one day he just had enough, and he just escaped and went out into the world. And he started seeing all the pain and all of the suffering, and it sort of really, really disturbed him. And he got so shocked that he was like, okay, I need to find a way to transcend this pain. And so he went and he did all of this really hardcore meditation where he was doing this penance and really breaking his body. And at a point he just realized that the futility of that. And he just went fully into embracing the human. He started drinking and having sex and partying and just completely embracing the human experience. And then that sort of led to this transitioning out of both of those. And the reason why I mentioned it is because we have I had this impression that, if there's pain, there's something wrong, and if we just use psychology enough, and if we just use spirituality enough, then there's nothing painful in this world. And the truth is that is a complete illusion. Pain is just a natural part of life, right? Even in nature, a storm comes and a really old, beautiful tree gets struck by lightning and it collapses, right? There was no one's trauma that created that.
Yes,
it's just a natural thing. And no matter how enlightened you are, if you see that, you will still feel it in your heart.
Yes.
So I like this idea of just embracing pain as a part of life, as opposed to because we're traumatized or because we're unaware or because that's not to say that increasing your awareness and healing your trauma doesn't make it easier to stop resisting that pain and be at peace with it and not resist it, because it totally does. But one of the huge realizations I had was that there was a part of me that was seeking to find a solution to all of this pain, through all of the different stuff that I've done. And
yes, and also, you're like me, you're like a fixer.
Yes.
A doer, and you want to always find a solution. And I realize this when I'm with my friends, sometimes they just want me to hear them, and I'm trying to find solutions to all their problems. Yeah. Yes, and it's again, there's this quote that I really love, which is, so pain is inevitable in human beings, but suffering is not accepting pain.
Optional.
Exactly. Suffering's optional. Suffering is when we don't accept that pain.
Yeah.
But pain is something we can't avoid as humans. So such a difference between these two things. Often we're in suffering because we just can't accept that we're in pain.
Yeah.
We're in a society where pain is not something that's favorable. And I noticed this when I was younger. At least now I feel I can do it better now. But I'd see one of my friends just start crying, and in the beginning when I was younger, I'd be like, no, don't cry, because we don't want to see them in pain, and mostly because it makes us so uncomfortable because it's triggered our own pain. And so, but because I see that in the other person and it triggers my discomfort, I don't want to be this. Don't be in pain. No, don't cry. It's okay. Everything's gonna be okay. But in reality, the best thing I could offer them is just, okay, your pain is welcome. You can feel it, and this is the space now to embrace that.
Yeah, those. I mean, this is the biggest lesson we can give kids. That it's okay for them to express whatever emotion they need to express, but very often we think helping them is for them, when actually it's because seeing them in pain causes us distress. So we try to fix it, for them, but also for us. And I think, the more we get accustomed to holding pain, then the more we can just give a loving presence to them in that moment. And yeah, it's a journey, right? It's something that we have to work to develop this quality, but it has so many benefits to it. And I think the quality of our human relationships is really struggling in today's modern world. I think if you look back at when people lived a more subsistence lifestyle, and there was a lot more interconnection, and there was a lot more community, and nature was a bigger part of the society. I think, it's easy to look back and say they had it better because, we have this tendency to do that. But I do think there is something there in the way that if you look nowadays, the way we relate to each other is very harsh. There's a lot of lack of compassion. And I think that's because we just have a lot of pain that we haven't really dealt with, and we don't know how to hold and cope with. So it ends up leaking out and vomiting out and firing out.
Social media sometimes is people getting attacked. It's quite hurts me a lot when I see these. I see a post about something and it gets turned and twisted, and really that's just people outwardly expressing their pain, but it ends up easier when you're behind the screen and you don't know.
Yeah, and I think one of the things is that we all have this need to be seen, and we all have this pain that at some point we weren't seen for our essence. But then what happens is when we come into relationship, you're not seeing me and I'm not seeing you, and I'm saying you see me, and so you're saying you see me and I'm saying you see me. Right, so we're kind of in this stalemate, where if you see me, then I'll be happy, and if I see you, you'll be happy. But neither one of us has the capacity to just
because we both have this massive need unmet, so
exactly.
We have the capacity to give it to the other person as well.
And it's a tragedy, right? That I can't see you because no one ever saw me. But then by not seeing you, I'm perpetuating that pain.
Yes.
And then I'm actually deepening your pain as well and making you even more entrenched. Yes. So then the next person you met, you're going to be even less likely to see them. And I think this is where, acknowledging our own needs takes the burden off other people having to fulfill them.
Yes, and also we can either, when we recognize we have this need to be seen, we can either get it from someone else who has capacity, or give it to ourselves, not try to get it from the person who doesn't have capacity for the same need.
Exactly, and I love the way that you said that, right? It's not all about, we have to only meet our own needs, because we're social creatures and actually we need each other. And that is the beauty of being human. And our nervous systems regulate with each other. So, previously I always thought, you don't need anyone else, right? But actually we do need, and it's okay to need, and allowing ourselves to receive from others is a total healing medicine. And it reminds ourselves and it tunes us to know that I deserve to receive. I'm worthy of receiving. But again, when we try to receive from someone who doesn't have capacity, then we're just going to create pain for ourselves and pain for the other person. And again, I think we all have this, calling to increase our capacity. And the only way to do that is to look at our unmet needs and honor them and meet them ourselves and turn to the people who do have the capacity to meet it for us. And I think that would just create, Gabor says this beautiful thing that it's the human being's essence to give. And it's only when we have some kind of constriction or some kind of trauma that we say, I don't want to give anymore. Not because we got hurt or we got let down, but when we actually go on this healing journey, we can really sink into that natural capacity to give, which makes us happy. We all know giving makes us happy. It's just that we give when we don't have the capacity, or we give in the wrong places, or we give out of expectation or pressure, as opposed to that childlike joy, you know, of a child who just like got given a chocolate and it's like, look, I got the chocolate, let's share it. You know, that real just
from
no mind.
Yes.
Yeah, just that is the
Yes.
essence, right? And I think it's a really beautiful thing to strive for in your life, to have this, you know, capacity.
Yes, and I guess it just comes from the self-awareness of what needs am I not, meeting within myself, and what are the strategies that I can meet them. Sometimes we're not able to give ourselves love. It's just we try and we just can't, and it's okay to get that from other people as a strategy, and then that helps us rebuild our own capacity for us to love ourselves. You know, that's why
Definitely.
we're so interconnected and we need each other. It's beautiful.
Yeah, this process that I went through really forced me to open myself to receive the support of my friends, and I had to be more vulnerable because I'm used to being strong. People see me as a strong character. I've held space for a lot of people. It's what I practically do for a living. So I have a big capacity to hold space for others. So it was easy for me to default into just being that. And when I got to that space where I literally just couldn't hold what I was going through anymore, I had to really turn to a lot of people like you and Larissa and Elena and Ilona and other friends that I have who really held space for me. And what I realized is that when you allow yourself to receive, you become a lot more abundant. Like I started, my therapist said this one thing to me, which really helped me, which she said, we shouldn't place the burden of being seen all on one person. Like very often we do this, especially in relationships, right? Like my partner needs to see me fully. And she was like, she's like, I see you a little bit, and your sister sees you a little bit, and your friend sees you a little bit. And as soon as she said that, it's like I just went into this mindset of seeing how many people could see me and hold me. Maybe not 100%, but maybe 10% was enough. Right? Like I have clients who, I met a client recently who I'd never met before, and she just walked into Sanya to buy a voucher, and I was really touched by our conversation because she said, I'm really inspired. We've never met, but I really feel blessed that you happen to be here. When I walked in, I'm so lucky to have met you, and I felt so touched. I was like, what? Like she feels lucky to meet me. Like it's really nourished me that she saw me in that way. It's different from the way that you see me because we've known each other since we were freaking 9 years old. You're never going to see me in that way that she saw me, right? Yes. But then you see me in a totally different way, that you've seen my vulnerability, you've seen my past, all of my ex-boyfriends, right? So it's like we've seen each other in a different way. And as soon as I shifted my mentality, it allowed me to receive from a lot of different people. And it's given me this intense feeling of abundance. So I went from sinking in my childhood pain and I wasn't seen in my childhood and all of that story to suddenly, as soon as I let myself feel that, actually I managed to open myself up to receive.
Yes, and also gives you more creativity to think, okay, what are the other strategies that I can come up with that can meet this need? It doesn't have to be just from this one friend, Like what you mentioned in relationships, something I learned that was really key, which is what you touched on in nonviolent communication, is this topic of like, so if I have my partner and, I really wanted to spend the evening with him because I want some company and some love and some affection, maybe he has other plans and he would really like to meet that need for me, but he's taking care of his own needs that may involve meeting other people. But it's my preference that he meets that need. But in the moment, it really feels like, no, my need is for you to spend time with me because you're the one who gives me that. And what I learned in MVC is that, no, it's your preference as a strategy that this person helps you meet that need, but you can be creative and find other strategies that from other people that can help you meet that need, or even yourself. But this thing of it's a preference, because sometimes you ask people, what's the need? I need you to meet me at this time, and it's not a need, it's a strategy. And this preference is such a delicate detail, but it's really changed my outlook on it.
Yeah, in fact, as you first used that word strategy, my mind went straight to MVC, which for those listening who don't know, MVC is nonviolent communication, and it's a school of learning how to communicate your needs in a more harmonious way. So, and Alex's boyfriend Rico is a practitioner right now.
He's doing the certification and training people and being trained.
Yeah, we'll be having some workshops actually at Sanya.
Yes,
coming soon, and it's really beautiful because again, all of these triggers, as you say, they end up in strategies of how we try to get love, and sometimes those strategies are a bit nefarious. Like they're not always pure. Like sometimes they can be a bit manipulative or a bit childish or a bit not conducive to the other person's well-being.
Yes, it wouldn't be the best strategy, right? It's still like having the awareness that, okay, that strategy is trying to meet some needs. So you can empathize with the strategy, even if it was maybe not the best strategy. But, okay, how can I find a strategy that maybe meets more needs, not just this one need?
And even just the awareness that we have a strategy, as you said, and that we're trying to get some kind of need met. I think so often we don't even realize that we're in pain because we're trying to meet a need and getting resistance from the outside world.
Yes, and what's amazing is when I see him, for example, sometimes someone's sharing something and I'm like already like, you can do this and you can do that, and he's just like gives them full attention, what they're feeling and what they're actually needing. And that's most of the time is just enough. Once they acknowledge, oh, actually I just need some understanding. Oh, actually I just need some empathy. Oh, I just need to be heard. Once people realize that, it's almost enough. And my program is like, okay, how can we fix you? Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? And it's like, it's not helpful sometimes.
Yeah.
Very often it's not helpful actually. Yeah. But then once all this acknowledgement happens, then it's like, okay, now what are the strategies that we can do to meet, all these needs? Because often it's more than one need.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously we get into so much trouble when we use these strategies to get our needs met, which are painful for the person, right? Obviously in relationship, this comes up a lot, right? Because we have this default of expecting our partner to fulfill certain needs. And as the relationship even gets longer, those expectations become more entrenched. And when the person doesn't meet that expectation, we can go into blame and arguments and anger and aggression and so on. And I love NVC because it's just such a beautiful tool to make relationships more harmonious. And I think so much of our struggles come from our relationships because they're the ones that mirror where we're still.
Yes, and our relationship with ourselves as well, because you can catch all the judgments or the doubts or it's really powerful. Yes. So I wanted to ask you, what about Sanya? Should we talk a little bit about what's going on with Sanya?
Yeah, for sure.
Maybe a recap of the past year or what's coming up.
Yeah, so it's really nice to just feel inspired again. I'm sort of emerging from this cocoon of my own, inner work and my work with compassionate inquiry, sorting through a lot of, new found issues or let's say new layers of already known issues. I think actually one of the things that I was really struggling with was because I've been generally quite a productive person. So it was really hard to just not feel that inspired to work and not have like my ideas. One of my greatest joys is being alone with my books and my inspirational things and just letting my ideas fly and brainstorming and creating. So it was really challenging for me to just surrender into the non-productivity. And now that I'm emerging, it feels really beautiful to have that inspiration. I feel very grateful for Sanya as a platform because, this was just a dream, to have a space where I could share all of the things that I love and that have helped me. I posted a video recently of a Saturday morning here, which was
I totally saw it, and I was getting the same feeling, like even just being here today.
Yeah. There's a lot of life in the space and we have a lot of events going on and there's just a lot of vibrancy.
Yes.
And that took a lot of hard work, to build our audience, to keep, spreading this message about Go Within and what Sanya's about and how we're not just like any other spa. It was, a long journey and it really feels beautiful to get to this space where there is this kind of momentum to our events and our activities. But one thing that I really want to do this year is obviously finish my course. And then I want to start integrating compassionate inquiry into some of the programs that we offer here.
Look up our course.
Yes, exactly. Because I feel like the inner child work has just given me so much and I want to share that with others. And I started a couple of years ago with this course called Holding Space, which was in a way like a real lead up into the work that I want to do now. Because as we said, holding space for others is, I think, a really beautiful gift. And I think it forces us to learn more about ourselves, which is another gift. And now I want to add this lens of compassionate inquiry to really deepen the work of how can we learn how to hold space for ourselves and others? How can we cultivate a presence that is peaceful, inspiring, and safe for others? There was this quote that I shared recently, which said, what if we judged ourselves by how safe others felt in our presence? And I would love, the Sanya audience to be touched by their experiences here enough that they go out into that world and be a safe space and be a bringer of peace and harmony, as opposed to the judgment, the stress, and the conflict that there is out there.
Yes.
One of the things that I mentioned in the last podcast was the Sangha. I really want to create a community of people who are going within, because we don't heal in a vacuum. It's as simple as that. And, nature has shown us that the best model for life is an ecosystem. And I don't want, the work that we do at Sanya just to be about me and what I teach and what I share, but I want it to be about the ecosystem. I shared this quote actually with my work at Sherwin. I'm probably not going to be able to sort of give you the exact wording, but the general idea was that a forest doesn't have one conductor, right? So there's no one master tree who tells all the other trees, how deep to grow their roots or when the rain is coming. It's actually more like a harmony and a unity that they are reacting in the moment. So there's more rain today, and then they react.
Symbiotic relationships of everyone
exactly
supporting each other.
Exactly. And I've been so touched by the wisdom that our clients here have. When we do tea ceremonies here, at the end everyone shares their realizations and their inspiration, and I wish I could bottle up all of their words and just, spread them out into the world, because there is so much wisdom in our client base. And I want to create a space where everyone can support each other and share their wisdom, whether that's people who facilitate or whether they just come as clients. I think we have a lot to learn from each other. Yes. And we need each other. And life is just so much more beautiful the more deep, open, authentic relationships you have. So that's really like 2023 for me and for Sanya. Of course, we're going to keep on doing all of the things that we do, but creating this community of people actually who are going to show up every month.
The Sangha.
Yeah.
Yes, the Sangha.
It's a monthly gathering. So every month we're going to have in-person events, but there's also an online community as well, with an online platform that I'm going to be launching shortly.
Amazing.
Where people can connect with even members who live in their area. Even if they live overseas, they could find, people in the Sangha who are in their area. And it's just going to be a place where we can interact and support each other. So
yes.
Creating community is really on the agenda for 2023.
Yes, and I just want to say, because I happened to speak to one of your clients this morning, and there's so much healing that happens here. Like, she was sharing with me that her name is Nina, and she'd be happy to share this, because she was raving about like how she's been coming here for 7 years and she comes almost every day. And I was almost crying when she was sharing. She said she had a stroke and she couldn't walk, and she thought that her life was over. And she started coming here and swimming in the pool every day, and she made friends, and she loves all the staff here, and it just completely saved her. She says, Sanya made me a Wonder Woman. It saved my life, and she had tears in her eyes. I had tears in my eyes. It's like the impact that this place is having on people is so profound and so mass as well. Like, so many people are touched even by a smile of someone who's working here, and everyone's holding it all together. And I really just want to, honor you for creating all of that with the vision and with your team and everyone that co-creates that, because it's like, people don't always share, but people are having a really profound effect. And it's not just the pool and the massage and all the therapies, the physical support for our bodies and our health, but also all the inner work that's encouraged here. And it's really not like a taboo topic. It's this is really important for us. It's a valuable part of life, and it's very encouraging for everyone. Like, just to see the list of events you have going on here, it's incredible. It opens up to a lot of people, these opportunities and this.
Yeah, thank you. Sometimes I forget to just stop and appreciate how far we've come. And because this is a labor of love, it means a lot to me to hold these kind of spaces. And I have to give credit to the team as well, because it's not easy to work in Sanya, because, especially the reception team, some of their family, I remember Larissa had this when she first started here. Larissa's been here since day one. And I remember in the beginning, you know, friends and family said, oh, you're just going to be a receptionist. You know, you could do so much better. Like, why don't you leave Sanya and go and do other things? And it's not easy to hear that, right? Like, if you take Larissa, I mean, she's so much more, like, her title, well, now she's the manager, but her title for many years was receptionist, but she holds space, right? She's an ambassador. She's actually giving people advice. She's sharing her opinion. She's guiding people. She then eventually started teaching yoga. You know, she spent last weekend in family constellation. So she's doing so much work on herself, not to become a better manager at Sanya, but to become a better space holder, so that when someone comes in and is having a bad day, she can feel them and offer them compassion, right? And that's something that it's a vocation. You know, you do that, you know, Larissa's still here, not because, you know, the pay is the best in the world, or because, you know, this is a title that can impress, you know, society. She's here because she truly gets fulfilled by holding space for others. And I have to credit them all, right? I'm just using Larissa as an example, but actually all of the team here are on this similar journey in their own way. And as I said, like, sometimes it's easy to just walk away and say, you know, when you get triggered or when some issue happens, it's very easy to say, like, oh, it's the workspace, like, I'm going to go on and find something else. But actually, when we can, you know, as a work team, hold space for those triggers and actually be a container for the self-development of the people in it. I don't meet most of our members. That's the reality, because I'm doing other things. I'm here, you know, today we've spent an hour also in this room. Or in the meantime, people are coming in and out of here not having met me.
Yes.
But they've met Larissa, and they've met Meltem, and they've met Becky, right? And they've met all of the other people who are, you know, an ambassador of what Sanya is all about.
In fact, this woman, Nina, she was just like, oh, these women, they're so amazing. They're part of my family. I go home, talk to my husband about them. They're part of my family. Like, it was so sweet, you know. It's just so touching.
Yeah, so it's a credit to them for, you know, really doing a lot of work on themselves, because it's not easy. And I'm very grateful that people come in here and feel that, because I never wanted Sanya to be just another spa. I never had any intention to open a spa. Right, and really, we're not a spa. We're actually a wellness center and so much more. And I like that people feel the soul here, because it's something that we do put attention to.
Yes, because in a way, it maybe sometimes it attracts people to do, let's say, well-being on a physical level. But then once you're here, it's also an invitation to work on the inner world, in terms of your self-care, you know.
Yeah.
And it's great because it's like almost a platform for people to like just step in. Maybe you just want to check out the spa, have an ice bath. But then you realize, oh, there's all these other things that can support my well-being. Yeah. And that's great for people. Yeah. Because they might not be exposed to this sort of, you know, workshops that you have here, and compassionate inquiry and all these incredible things.
Yeah. And I think this is why it was also a bit hard for me to go through a bit of a rough time the last few months, because, you know, when you're in that state, you find it more difficult to connect with people because you're very overwhelmed by your own emotion. So yeah, again, you know, I'm going to say it for the third time, I credit to the team, right? Because they stepped up and also were that presence when I couldn't be. And sometimes I couldn't give them, you know, the quality of attention and presence that I would like to because of my own journey. But that's the beauty of community, right? That usually we don't all break down at the same time. You know, there's always one person that's maybe going through a little bit of a tough time and everyone's rallying around them. And then, you know, we all take it in turns to hold space for each other. And that's what I want to spread wider amongst the client base, you know, to bring people into that way of living and way of supporting each other, because I think it's really crucial. And in a world where we've become quite isolated, there's a lot of statistics nowadays about loneliness and, you know,
depression, anxiety.
Yeah, the isolation that people feel, especially in a post-COVID world, and the physical health toll of loneliness is like smoking 1 or 2 packets of cigarettes a day. So it's really toxic for us to feel isolated and disconnected. Yes. And at the same time, it's not easy to connect when you're in pain. Yes. So we need those spaces where we can put the pain down and unpack it and just see it with love and compassion and support.
In reality, these needs are our basic human needs, you know, connection, community, touch, intimacy. They're all like basic human needs. That's in what's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Yeah. Without them, you don't survive. Just like, you know, maybe not on the same level as like oxygen and shelter, but they're on the list. Like we need them, and maybe we just don't realize that, you know, it's important for us to find strategies to meet those needs, whether it's in different ways.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, going back to the child, like it's very hard for the child to reconcile these needs, especially when they're not getting met.
Mm-hmm.
So as an adult, we also struggle, because we've got those remnants of those coping mechanisms and beliefs. And yeah, I'm looking forward to, graduating from this course. I still have, another sort of 6 months to actually get properly certified. But I'm really looking forward to bringing more of this way of thinking and this philosophy into the work that we do here, because it's given me a lot on a personal level.
Okay, so I have a question for you. What about for someone who's maybe never been to Sanya and really is a bit curious about going on a bit more of an inner journey, and like where would you recommend someone starts? Because it might maybe sound like a lot, or feel like you have a lot of services here. Like where would you recommend someone starts to just dip their toe into this world and explore something within a bit?
Yeah, good, super question. I think it really depends on the person. So I would just tell them to reach out to us and just like tell us where you're at, and we'll guide you. Whether that's myself, whether that's any of the rest of the team, they have a lot of experience now, the girls, and they will do all of our services here. So, I mean, I love meeting people one-on-one and giving them any sort of, support that I can. But, we often get people just emailing us and saying like, hey, I just went through this operation and I'd like to do this and I'd like to get here or there. Like, what do you recommend for me?
Yes.
And we're always happy because there are a lot of services here and there's lots of things you can do. And it's really, each person needs to experiment and find the things that work for them.
And because there's so many different things, I think even just stepping in here is a good start as well. Like, maybe if this is all quite new, you could just do a yoga class, or like use the pool, and then it will open some more and more doors and curiosity as well, because some people find it even hard to ask for help, to reach out and be vulnerable and say, I need some help. That a lot of people have that. So what's great about here is that even if you just walk through the door and have a chai latte in the cafe or have a nice juice, so that's already a good start, right?
Yeah. I mean, I often walk into the changing rooms to go to the bathroom and I find one member like counseling another member and like giving her a little pep talk and like, hey, yeah, you can do it. Or,
just go to the bathroom. So
just come to the bathroom at Sanya and your inner journey will start.
That's great. Nice. I wanted to ask about the festival.
Yeah.
If you're ready to share about it.
Yes, I am. I don't have a date, but the festival was something we used to do before COVID. And it was just like a 2-day event where we just have tasters of all of our workshops, all of our treatments, inspirational talks, and so on. And we're going to bring that back in April. So we're going to have a 2-day open day here.
I'm very excited for that.
Something really beautiful has actually been just the amount of facilitators asking us to collaborate. So we've just been getting so many requests for people to host workshops here. And that's really beautiful for me because, I mean, just today I was talking to a lady in Australia who wants to do somatic, dance therapy workshops here at Sanya, which, that's what we started talking about, right? Like the power of the somatic practice and dance is so healing. So I'm looking forward to, gathering more facilitators as well, offering their different stuff and weaving it all together. And I think the festival is the best time for us to be able to give people a taste of all the different stuff available.
So rich, because like already if you bring the facilities that you already have and all the treatments, like it's such a rich experience to offer that, the 2-3 days.
Yeah.
And that's also a great opportunity for someone to delve into this world.
Yeah, definitely. I think, sincerity along the inner journey, like even when you just say, I'm ready to prioritize my inner world, like that's a powerful intention. And I really believe, me, myself, I had that intention and then the universe put that book, that person, that trip, that, and you just follow the thread. Joseph Campbell, The Hero's Journey, talks about the thread, following the thread of the hero's journey.
Yes.
And sometimes we just need to start small and go with the heart and really feel, okay, I'm just going to make this small step. And every step leads you to another step.
Yes.
That's the magic of the journey, that even if we had to plan it ourselves, the universe is just going to plan it so much better.
Yes, and maybe there's someone listening to this who's already feeling some sort of urge, pull towards, this sort of life. Doesn't have to be at Sanya, anywhere.
Yeah.
That's that feeling we get inside, that calling, that's like, you can't deny that, the mind can't deny that, we know it's there. And
nowadays
we all have that in a way.
So many books, so many podcasts, so many videos. The amount of support that you can get and inspiration is huge. I'm a big advocate, obviously, for like the mentorship relationship because it's impacted me a lot. So I think there is something to be said from having personal guidance and intimate.
Yes, because you do one-on-ones,
support.
right? Maybe you can elaborate on that.
Yeah, but I wasn't meaning, that they have to come to
I'm
me,
curious
just like
as well,
in general.
because I know that you're having more and more these sort of clients, and you always tell me how powerful it is, and I think that's also quite interesting for people to know that you offer that as well.
Yeah, so I do offer one-on-one sessions where I use, I draw on my sort of experience, my own personal experience. I'm not a psychotherapist, I'm not a doctor, I'm just a yoga practitioner, yoga student. Obviously now with the CI training, I'm bringing a lot of elements of compassionate inquiry into it. So, I mean, what I do with each client is very different. Sometimes we meditate, sometimes we talk, sometimes we go into the body and feel, but it's always with that intention of just going within and knowing yourself and finding a bit of emotional calmness, right? Like trying to get a sense of harmony with our own feelings. That's, I could say, the intention of the sessions. But as I said, just the student relationship, I've been really helped by my own therapist in the last few months. And I just believe a lot in having someone that can really get to know us and know the nuances of our coping mechanisms. Because sometimes, my therapist would pass comments about me. She would say, you're like this. She showed me one thing which I can share because it's not really personal, but she said, you're a very intense person. You feel everything at like 100, and she just goes, can you just like ramp down the volume a bit sometimes? Because sometimes you need to be at work and you need to be like not at 100. And as soon as she said that to me, I was like, wow, like it was such a beautiful reflection to one, see myself like, yeah, maybe I am quite intense and maybe I can just like have that capacity to just lower the volume instead of feeling overwhelmed by that intensity. And she did this whole visualization with me where she asked me to choose a mechanism for like lowering the volume. She said like that can be like turning on the valve on a tap, or it could be, I can't remember the other ones.
Like a physical movement.
Yeah, like a sort of visualizing like a tap with water and you're just like closing a bit the valve. She said like choose something like that. And yeah, my mind just went to this really beautiful metaphor of being at Pepe's land. And I don't know if you remember, he has these like fountains. Fountains is the wrong word, but they're like these sort of trays, and they flow. They structurize the water, so they're flowing.
They revitalize the water.
Exactly. So there was this water flowing from like one sink to the other sink to the other sink in a tray, and then it's eventually into the pond. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And my mind just went to there and visualized myself like putting rocks on the edge to like just soften the water flow with the rocks, and it was so beautiful that my mind, I don't even know where it came from, this metaphor. But it really helped me then, in my subsequent days. I was just like, every time I felt a bit intense, I just went into my mind. I was just like, I'm just going to put a couple of rocks on that flow. Like, it's okay, I'll deal with you later. Like, the water's still there, it's in the pond. And when I go home, I'm gonna tend to you. But I don't need that waterfall right now in this moment. Yes. And so little things like this, a person has to know you and they have to have witnessed you and been with you for some time to be able to give you that kind of reflection that can really just be super helpful. That's not something you can get from YouTube, right? Or from a book necessarily.
Yes. Oh, amazing. I'm just wondering, do we have more time?
Yeah, I have no idea. I didn't keep any clock handy today, so I think unless you have any other questions, we can.
I think we're quite complete.
Yeah, cool.
So lots to absorb.
Whilst I have you here, maybe we can end with just you sharing a little bit about what you've been up to with Deep Ecology, because you're also an incredible host and you're going to be doing some stuff at the Sanya Festival, apart from all of your beautiful contributions that you give in many ways here. But I think Deep Ecology is really beautiful and it's something a bit hard to explain. So maybe once I have you here, for those people who would be curious.
Yes, it's a good time as well because I've done a lot of facilitation support. I'm doing a course actually to, deepen this topic, how I share it, because I've been sharing it for a few years now. But so basically, it's called The Work That Reconnects, and it was invented by this woman called Joanna Macy and also another woman called Molly Brown. And basically, they were activists in the 70s, and they were finding that it was really difficult to make change, So they discovered that through this type of work, the work that reconnects, when people have the capacity to really connect to what's going on in the world and allow what's within to surface, that has a higher capacity for change because it allows us to feel that deeper connection with ourselves, with each other, and with the planet. And from that space, we're much more motivated to make positive change. And really what they call it so many different things, despair work, or feeling the grief of the world. So just like we have suppressed emotions that we, from our own traumas, the fact that the whole world is experiencing trauma on a day-to-day basis in so many ways, and wars and animals becoming extinct and deforestation and all of these things, they affect us. But again, we've created a coping mechanism to not feel everything because it's too much if we have to feel all of the pain that's happening in the world. But this work helps us to really connect with the fact that if something's happening to you or to someone I don't know in Uganda, or other countries, it's happening to me on a certain level. But we've become accustomed to suppressing that just like we suppress our own emotions. So this work sort of creates space for us to feel that grief of what's going on in the world, because it does affect us, and allowing what's within to resurface is what the space does, really. It's not about trying to make people feel pain or what's going on, but allowing because we're all affected by different topics. You might be caring about the elephants, I'm caring about, children, who are being abused. There's actually a lot happening that it's so easy for us to just scroll past on Facebook, because that's, again, another coping mechanism, because we can't feel everything. We don't have the capacity to feel the pain of everything.
I just had to let out a yawn whilst you were going through all of that. It's like, release it so much.
It can be quite heavy. It's not for everyone maybe, but it's actually, if we spend more time grieving about what's actually going on in our world, about how things are not the way we would like, that's super healing for ourselves and also for the collective world. Because the reality is these things are happening and we don't always acknowledge them because it's heavy. And doing that as a group together allows us to pass through that. And the more that we do that, the more we feel connection to these deeper issues that are affecting our world. And we have the capacity to, move past that and overcome that. And the more people that do this work, the more capacity there is for change.
Yeah, and it brings the joy, right?
Exactly.
You feel the joy of
it's a spiral. So you go through gratitude, despair. It's like, not just sort of taking everyone to the pain. It's a process, and it's often with some physical activities and, sometimes some creativity, some artwork, and it's a really beautiful, powerful work. And for me as a person who I love community, I just believe in, as soon as you look into someone's eyes and you realize, well, we're all just connected to each other as human beings, that can be the most powerful thing. And it's so easy for us to feel connected to someone we just met instantly. And that realization is very profound.
Yeah.
And for me, this work feels close to my heart, and I want to take people on longer journeys now, because I've been sharing this sort of work for a while, but I want to go on longer journeys now. So I'm excited to share this at the festival as well.
Amazing. Me and Simon, in the last episode, we spoke a lot about the grief and, this connection between our inner grief and the outer grief. It was actually a super beautiful conversation. So if you're listening and haven't checked it out, then check it out. Awesome. Super. Good place to wrap it up. Started with the personal, we went into the collective. Nice. Next stop, universal. So thank you everyone for listening. I super appreciate that people resonate with these topics. Go Within means the world to me, as hopefully you can tell by the passion that we put into these conversations and into Sanya in general. It is really nice to hear from you, the audience. So if this conversation touched you in any way, or are there any topics that you'd like to hear more about, then please do let us know. It touches my heart to know that people are listening and that these conversations actually support you in some way. And if you can share, and do all of those things that you're supposed to tell people to do on social media.
And even look back at the other conversations, right? The ones you started out were also super rich. And sometimes I scroll through and I listen to an old one and they're still so relevant and profound, For me, it's a great reminder that there's all these other conversations that you've been doing over the years.
Yeah, there's actually quite a bank now, because I realize I've been doing this since 2015 or something like that. So there's quite a few years of episodes.
Yes,
we started Sanya in 2016, and I actually started the podcast before Sanya. It was the Grassy Hopper podcast originally.
Yes, okay.
So it's been quite a while of podcasting and recording these episodes. So there is quite a bank there, and I do really want to bring more love into this podcast over this year. So we have quite a few episodes already planned for this year. So yeah, hopefully we can nourish our audience through these conversations. So.
I mean, for January, quite a good start.
Yeah, two already. Yeah, we're on track.
Good sign of what's to come.
Exactly. So thank you all, and hope to see you at a Sanya event or share a moment in the sauna at some point. I've been making more of an effort to jump in the sauna and the ice bath myself. So hope to catch you around. And if you do see me around, please come and say hi. I love to chat with all of our clients here and receive all of your nuggets of wisdom that you all have. Thank you, and see you next time.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Go within.
But